The panel and I were looking at the guest list and we realized that this show is finally chasing down its own version of the EGOT. We have Kevin Willmott here today, our first Oscar winner, and next week we have Jethro Waters, who has an Emmy on his shelf. Now we just need to find a Grammy and a Tony winner to round out the panel. So if you're out there and you've got the hardware, you're opposite line, we got a chair waiting for you. As I mentioned, today's guest is Kevin Willmott, who won an Academy Award for Best Adapted Screenplay for co-writing Spike Lee's BlacKkKlansman, despite the fact that, as we established last week, Paul Haggis had already solved racism in 2004 with Crash. Kevin, didn't you get the memo?
Yes, that's good.
But we're not here to talk about Spike Lee. We're here to talk about the other Kevin Willmott, who has left a legacy as an independent filmmaker and satirist from his perch at the University of Kansas. Last week, we looked at Ralph Bakshi, a nihilistic journeyman who produced 3 great works, Fritz the Cat, Heavy Traffic, and Coonskin. This week, we are turning to a genuine craftsman, a cinematic arsonist whose knowledge of the visual language of movie making has transformed the art. Welcome to the show, Kevin Willmott.
Thank you, my friend.
I fully expect you to blow our audience away today, just as my 1986 Spartans were blown away in overtime in the Sweet 16 by your Jayhawks. That was, of course, a game where the clock itself seemed to stop, mysteriously, leaving a generation of fans like myself to wonder, what if? What if is the subject of today's episode, as Kevin's 2004 mockumentary, CSA, the Confederate States of America, asks, what if the South had won the Civil War? I'm Eric Trommater.
I'm Erin Brown.
I'm Jennifer Trujillo.
I'm Sila Blume.
And I'm Kevin Willmott, and this is World Cinema History.
Confederate Express, the nation's leading shipper, issued a warning today that house servants are using the service to, in their words, overnight themselves to freedom.
There was this one fella, shipped his whole family, wife and 2 kids, up north in a box labeled Home Entertainment Center. Another big tip, check for air holes.
Do you know someone of questionable racial identity? A neighbor? Someone at work? Contact the Office of Racial Identity at 1-800-555-PASS. You might be eligible for a cash reward.
That's right. Passing.
Train for a new and exciting career at C.I., the Cartwright Institute for the Study of Freedom Illnesses. In just months, not years, C.I. can train you for a rewarding career as an overseer, paddy roller, servant monitor, breeder, or get an associate's degree in e-slave accounting. Perform medical experiments. Learn the nature of freedom diseases. You'll be proud working firsthand with doctors, tackling the challenges of Negro peculiarities. Become that person you always knew you could be. Call CI today. Classes are forming, so call right now.
Before we dive deep into CSA, here's a rogues gallery of Kevin's other work as an independent spirit. The first film that I know Kevin for was 9th Street in 1999, which I thought was memorable for getting Martin Sheen, Isaac Hayes, and Casey Moore into one feature out of Junction City. It's quite a heavy lineup. The other story was you had actually dragged the negative on the ground to give it a scratched up older look, which I kind of is that the ultimate slashing your own canvas in pursuit of art?
Well, you know, it was more like we were just making the movie any kind of way we could. That's kind of how I got dragged around, I think, a little bit. But that was as good as we could get it, at the time.
It was a wonderful first feature, and I was incredibly impressed by that. But how were you able to put together such a stellar cast and a stellar soundtrack?
That film, that was really my first film. I'd made a couple little small videos, but 9th Street started out as a play. And really, I came back to Kansas. I was, went to NYU and was living in New York for a few years trying to get started. But I kind of figured out that I needed to go back home to Kansas to try to get a film made because no one knew me in New York. And so no one was going to give me an opportunity there, really. So I came back to Kansas, and that movie took me 9 years to make. The good thing about the 9 years was that, I would, raise a little bit of money and shoot some. And so along the way, good things happened. I kind of found a contact that put me in touch with Isaac Hayes, and I found another contact that put me in touch with Martin Sheen. He was in Topeka making a mini series, and so I went and saw him, and he was kind enough to give me an afternoon. So I quickly wrote him into the script, and we shot him in one afternoon. But I kind of was able to weave him kind of all through the movie. So, I took advantage of the not having any money and really embracing, and instead of it being a negative, it kind of turned into a positive. And I was able to get Isaac, and I was able to get Casey Moore, lived in Kansas City, and I was able to find her, and so it's just, bad and good things all coming together.
Now, I haven't seen your next film, Bunker Hill, but your 2012 film, Destination Planet Negro, is notable. First, of course, you voiced a robot named Strom Thurmond, which will never not be funny to me. You produced it for $5,000, and that almost all of it went to catering. Erin Brown, on our panel, named her company Pizza Horse Productions because her first budget was literally pizza. Is this just a Kansas thing?
It was a Kansas thing. I knew no one was ever going to give me any money to make this film. So I just decided to ask everybody to work for free. So I just called in all my buddies, and I think we all kind of liked it enough to just do it. And again, I knew it was going to take me a while. It took me about 3 years to make that film. We did it a little bit at a time, mainly weekends and that kind of stuff. I wrote it knowing that it was going to take me a long time. And so I structured it that way. And I wrote it kind of knowing what I had access to as well. And one of the reasons I played one of the leads is because, I knew I would show up. So that was kind of how that project was made. And that's ended up being one of my favorite films, really. I think what the movie's about, and the fun we had making it. And it was just a great time.
So we're going to skip over the next few years. Apparently, you and Spike Lee made some movies together, and you won an Oscar or something. I don't know.
Something like that.
The next time you arrived on my radar was in 2020 with your film, The 24th. Important to me simply because I saw it right after the George Floyd murder, and it was important to me to be sitting in a community of people at a movie theater, being able to watch a film on this subject. But it turns out I was one of very few people who saw this in the theaters.
Yes.
Because it only had a release for film festivals, and most people had to watch it on streaming. I highly recommend it as an excellent film. But the other thing that I think is even more impressive than the film itself is you shot it in 18 days. That's 2 days less than we were blowing smoke up Godar's ass for breakfast for doing.
Well, yeah, I mean, we did it fast, and but it didn't seem fast for the most part. I mean, the last night we shot, it was a night shoot, and we shot until the sun came up and we had to stop. But that was the only day I really felt like really rushed. But it was again another great shoot. That's a movie that I had been wanting to make for a very long time. The Houston riot of 1917. I'm as you can see, I'm kind of a history guy. That's another one of these stories that Hollywood's never going to tell. That movie, again, was something I've been trying to make for a long time. Finally, after I'd won the Oscar, that kind of gave me enough cachet to get a little money. And so I got together with a former student of mine. His name is Trey Byers, noted for his great work on the TV show Empire. Played one of the sons on the show. We got together and rewrote it with Trey in mind playing the lead. We were able to get a really great cast, and we shot it in North Carolina. It worked out really well. I'm really proud of it because it tells a piece of history that America knows very little about. And after our film was made and got out there, COVID came and really killed our theatrical release, obviously. But people have kind of, I think, been finding it on streaming since then.
If you ever go to Houston, boy, you better walk right, and you better not squabble. And you better not fight, betting Bronco will arrest you. Hitting the boom will take it down. You can bet your bottom dollar That's your sugar
It's
land
really one
gonna
of those
listen to
American
my
stories
prayer.
that America has really buried. I mean, it's the only riot in American history that more white people died than black people. And the men of the 24th Infantry Division, the Buffalo Soldiers, they were sent to Houston, Texas in 1917, and the police were just brutalizing them. And just simple as that. And these guys had, a lot of them had fought on San Juan Hill in the Spanish-American War, had fought in the Philippines during the Philippine insurrection. So they were used to, being treated with a certain degree of respect. And when they got to Houston, the Houston police were just bloodthirsty rednecks. I mean, there's no other way to say it. And they just brutalized them. And so about 100 troops marched on Houston, Texas, and went after the police. And so they've always buried that story, in American history because of the racial discomfort, which, of course, racial discomfort is kind of up my alley. So of course I want to tell that story.
Everybody has to have a hobby, right, Kevin?
That's right.
Speaking of things that are up your alley, a film that we didn't mention, The Only Good Indian, was set during this period, but you seem to have a fascination with the 1880s, the so-called redemption period. What is it about the 1880s over, say, the 1860s in American history that keeps bringing you back time and time again?
Well, I think the 1880s, that whole period really after the Civil War up until, the 1900s and stuff, is the thing that defines us as Americans. I mean, it defined American life. And that's when everyone tried to start becoming real American citizens. And that's when women, start to get to vote there and become suffragettes. And that's when black people, are given citizenship and start to try to become full-fledged American citizens, and that's when all the backlash starts. That's where segregation begins, and that's when the lynching starts, and all the horrors of American life begin then. And that conflict of people trying to become citizens is kind of what America is really all about, and that's the struggle we're still in now. And so that struggle is, I think, the American struggle. And that's also what most Americans know very little about. Most Americans, kind of after the Civil War, they know a few battles in the Civil War. They may know, Grant and Lee. They know Abraham Lincoln, but they don't know many details about any of that. And they know nothing that happens from after the Civil War until Pearl Harbor, 1941 or something. But that period, that 1870s, 1880s, 1890s into the teens is the thing that defines American life in so many ways today. And so I've always kind of been attracted to that period.
Speaking of history, we have an ongoing debate on this show. My claim is the inventor of the mockumentary was Peter Watkins with Culloden and The War Game in the late 1960s. There are people here who debated me on this, but saying that they weren't actually mockumentaries.
And we still will.
And
we will still debate
will.
you on that.
What were some of the things when you went to go make CSA, which is a mockumentary that imagines that the South had won the Civil War? What were some of the influences that helped you come up with this concept?
Well, my big influence on that was actually a TV show. There was a TV show in the 70s called Appointment with Destiny. And it was kind of a version of You Are There. It was on CBS. And it took episodes of history, various important moments in history, and approached them like a documentary, as if like movie cameras were there, existed. So they would do like Jesse James, and you could interview Jesse James like a camera existed back then. And like they did one on the crucifixion of Jesus, and all these really cool kind of moments in history. And that kind of what if there was a camera available to you kind of, and they shot it just like a documentary. It was really, it was really cool. And now they got some of these episodes on YouTube now. It's called Appointment with Destiny. And so I saw that as a kid, and it just really, really kind of has always stayed with me. And the whole thing of making it look like a documentary, making the footage look like a documentary, doing the fake interviews and really embracing the provocative nature of what if you could talk to Jesse James back when he was, robbing banks, and John Dillinger, if you could talk to him, and that kind of thing was really, really cool. And that nerdy, geeky part of me has always stayed with that. But then, obviously, it was the project more than anything came out of my frustration with Hollywood about the issue of slavery. The first screenplay I sold was with my buddy Mitch Bryan. We wrote this screenplay about John Brown, the abolitionist. And it was told from the point of view of Shields Green, who was an enslaved man who was hung with John Brown. The script was called Shields Green and the Gospel of John Brown. And we sold it to 20th Century Fox. It was a big sale. And the Chris Columbus with 1492 Productions, the guy that did Home Alone and Mrs. Doubtfire, that stuff, he actually bought the script. It was going to be kind of one of his rare dramatic kind of entries. That sale got us into it. But then we kind of ran into a lot of, after that, when we would try to write other things about slavery or anything with kind of Black history kind of stuff, you'd always get this, well, Amistad didn't do well, Beloved didn't do well. And do well meaning money, didn't make a lot of money. And so, Black history, especially things connected to slavery, has always been a tough sell in Hollywood. And so I kind of, that frustration led me to really want to make a movie about something that made slavery connected to today, so that, you kind of take it in the past and you make people feel it today. And I was also very frustrated with the Confederate flag being still flying over the state house in South Carolina and on a lot of people's cars. Even I live in Kansas, it was on people's cars out here still today. And so it really came out of my frustration with all of that. And so that all of those things combined to kind of create CSA.
Viola, honey, I just saw your slave running off down the street. Hurry, call the police. No problem.
No problem? But aren't you afraid he'll get away?
Heavens, no. Not with the shackle.
Introducing the shackle, the revolutionary new way of servant monitoring. Just place the shackle around his or her wrist, and when your property strays from your designated area, in minutes, the authorities have your chattel in custody. The secret? Inside the shackle is a space-age computer monitoring chip, allowing the police to track your slippery buck on radar. In no time, he's back home in his cabin. Made of lightweight aluminum alloys, the shackle won't weight your uncle down like old-fashioned chains. And it's tough. The shackle will stand up to the most strenuous of escape attempts. It's unbreakable. It comes in a variety of sizes, perfect for children, and at the low, low price of $49.95. Why wait? Step into the 21st century. Get the shackle.
Aren't you going to stay for coffee?
Can't. Gotta get the shackle.
Have your credit card ready or send $49.95 check or money order to the shackle. The shackle keeps them in line every time. Operators are standing by.
It's a double satire because you're not only satiring these stereotypes, these tropes, you're also satiring the BBC and the Ken Burns documentary. I think the perfect example of that is the Sherman Hoyle character, who is obviously meant to mimic the rhythm of Shelby Foote. But I felt a bit of Walker Percy in there, too, because he had this kind of a detached philosopher thing that Walker Percy does and Shelby Foote really doesn't. Is that a deliberate homage to the Southern Man of Letters archetype, or is Walker's just become so convenient a cliche for that kind of thing?
Excuse me, I was thinking of Shelby Foote. Man, my dear late friend, Rupert Pate, who plays Hoyle in the film, he was a philosopher himself and a historian and a great guy, great friend. And so, yeah, I think you get a little bit of Rupert actually in there. So he's probably the guy that's connecting to Percy there. Just his own intellectual muscle.
Hopefully he didn't become as reactionary as Walker.
No, he's a beautiful liberal hip brother, But yeah, I mean, I think that's probably where you pick up a little bit.
Down home.
At the Coon Chicken Inn, we aim to please. The best 100% mammy-made family-style meals. You can taste the love.
I like the white meat. I'm a breast man.
We just love it here. You'll just keep hollering, gal, fetch me some more. Look for that wide-mouthed coon near you.
Coon chicken.
Well, my last question before we open it up to the panel is about the sort of Uncle Ben little bits throughout in terms of the fake television commercials and the products throughout it. The real gut punch comes at the end when we find out that almost all of these were real products at one point. Was there anything in your research where you found a real product, but you thought, I'm not going to use that one because no one's actually ever going to believe it?
Not really. I mean, I felt I tried to use the ones that I thought I could kind of make a commercial out of. And, most of those products disappeared after the civil rights movement. And so when the CSA had won, there's no civil rights movement. And so all those racist, horrible things would have just kept going. And a lot of them, the big challenge was kind of picking the one to kind of satire and turn into a modern commercial. But yeah, no, there was not any that I steered away from.
Fall out here means more than growling a young buck. It's a time of crisp, clean morning air, and the sound, thundering stampede. It's a time when horses come down from the high pasture, and a man prepares for another tough winter. It's time for a nigger hair, an American cigarette.
Nigger hair tobacco, ended up being nigger hair cigarettes in the film, was probably the biggest, slasher because of, obviously, with the big N in the word.
And the hard R.
Yes, and the hard R. Yes, and the hard R. I think it's just kind of that one allowed me to make the audience, I think, believe, because we don't know much of this history because it's been so buried and hidden from us in various ways, untaught. That that we're just, the movie is being just juvenile and reckless, and that we're just being racist ourselves and doing these horrible things. Then you find out that this is who we are as Americans, and like I said, that delivers a gut punch. And so that one allowed me to kind of, it was more about the placement of it more than anything. It's like, as the commercials go along, they kind of get worse and worse and crazier and crazier. And that was purposeful in terms of kind of making the audience believe that it starts out as kind of an all in the family kind of, safe satire kind of thing. And then as it goes along, the knives start to come out and we start to poke people a lot harder. And finally you really kind of, one story I heard from a friend that saw the movie in a theater in Omaha, Nebraska, and he said some skinheads were in the audience, and they just thought the movie was a hoot, but as the movie went along, they got quieter and quieter, and eventually they just walked out. And that was exactly how I designed it, in terms of making people, racist people, and it's funny because the racist people, somebody must have told them, you need to go see this movie because it's really, it really makes fun of black people or something. So they go there thinking that. And then as the movie goes along, it becomes, the narrative becomes more serious and it becomes more modern. And you start to see the attack on us today in terms of, Reagan and the 80s and all the things that, at the time were still very prevalent in society. And so they didn't enjoy that part, so they left. And then it's the opposite, where you've got, liberal folks who, are kind of not wanting to be challenged either in various ways. And they feel it's kind of safe in the beginning, but then as it goes along, then they find out that it's about a lot of things they didn't know much about.
Well, I'm going to turn this over to Erin, who's not that far from you.
I'm in the Kansas City area.
What is it about the Lawrence, the studio system there that allows you to do these kind of works real quick before we get to Erin? And I'm asking both Erin and you. I've heard two stories of entire film budgets being dedicated to catering, and they were both from one was from Erin Brown, and the other is from Kevin Willmott.
Well, I'll let Erin speak on this too, but I think we're not jaded by movies out here. We're not jaded by film. I mean, we don't get and when I first moved here, I grew up in Kansas, but I didn't grow up in Lawrence. And when I first moved here, we occasionally got Hollywood movies through here. The Day After was shot here. And so, but that doesn't happen much anymore. But I taught at the film school here, KU. And so we got a lot of, budding filmmakers and a lot of filmmakers in the area and some very talented people around. And they make movies, and people kind of help each other get their movies made. And that's one of the reasons I decided to stay here, was that the Kansas City, Lawrence area is really great for helping each other to try to get their movie made. And it's just one of the hip things about being in small town USA.
Yeah, that's been my experience as well with films is everybody pitches in. You can't pay them, but you can feed them. And then you trade work. You'll work on their film, they'll work on your film. You can write a script, and one of your friends will be like, that's funny, I want to shoot that. It's really collaborative. It's a lot of fun. It's a much more artistic area than I think we're given credit for, honestly.
No doubt about it. And I think that that collaborative thing has helped me in so many ways. And when I make features now, and people always talk about how collaborative I am. And it's kind of, I think, partly because I grew up making these movies the way I did, where you had to give people a sense of ownership with your movie. And that sense of ownership is kind of one of the things that people don't probably see a lot of in studio films.
I don't know if the studio system is really set up the same way, honestly. I mean, we're all just doing this for the hell of it,
That's exactly right. And everything is, everything is so, the money is such a, restrictive pressure device on everything that it kind of eliminates the notion of collaborative. And you've got to, everybody's, you've got to know exactly what you're doing all the time. And there's no room for discussion about things. And not that I discuss things on the set, but when you make any movie that you make that's have some sense of restriction on the budget, you're having these conversations with all your departments about how you're going to do all these great things you got planned and for not enough money. And that's really where the collaboration comes from, because with most people, they want to do the best they can for you within the parameters that you can give them. And to me, that's always been a fun challenge. It's not something I see as a problem. When problems happen in terms of budgetary problems happen in a production, I embrace those situations. And I mean, I've learned from years of working with no budgets that usually there's a really great solution, and one that typically is often better than the idea you had in the first place.
Between you and me, Kevin, if you'd had the budget to recreate the clown's mouth for the Coon Chicken Inn, that would have been in the movie, right?
Yes. Yeah, I could not have escaped that one. That's exactly right.
My only disappointment was not having somebody take a camera through that clown's mouth.
Even though if I had made it, then people would not have believed it. So it's kind of there's those things of seeing the actual photograph.
Something that was funny about the Coon Chicken Inn, I didn't know that was real. I was when it popped up in your movie, I just remembered it was a plot point in Ghost World.
Yes.
That Steve Buscemi's character collected memorabilia from Cook's Chicken. And I was like, wait a minute. Then at the end, when you said it's a real thing, I'm like, oh my God, that's insane. I had no idea it was real. I really liked revealing at the end that these products were real, because we don't think about that. Also, like, how long did it take to do all the research to make all the different bits of this film in so many different styles? Because that was incredibly impressive. You got the commercials, then you got the movie clips and different genres of movies. That was amazing. How long did that take to do that?
Well, this movie took about 3 years to shoot, and again, I never had over about $5,000-6,000 at a time. And my cinematographer Matt Jacobson, who's a professor at KU as well, he's the guy, he's the genius behind all the looks of the film. I mean, he really did the research, and we had a lot of fun with that. That's one of the things where you use the time to your advantage. You know, you really. When we went and shot the D.W. Griffith Search for Dishonest Abe movie, went out in the country, found some reenactor guys that would do it with us, and I think he shot it on like a Bolex kind of handheld Bolex kind of thing, and we really did scrape the negative up on a couple things specifically on the footage of Abraham Lincoln, where before he dies in Canada, and just a little bit of early film footage of him talking, and then we did all the work on how it would have been recorded, and the recording would have been jarring and out of sync and stuff, and so all of that was a lot of fun. And I remember one of the best compliments I received when the lab got the footage. He said, "How did you get this?" I think they actually thought it was Lincoln, that he had, there was some film footage of Lincoln or something that we had found. It's like, no, he died way before movie cameras. But yeah, that was that part of things. We always try to shoot it the way it would have existed in real life. I mean, like the Hollywood movie we shot on 35. The commercials we shot on video, and so and that was a little weird for us, because when we had to put it all together for the feature release, this is when digital was just starting really, and so they had trouble syncing up the video and this and all the different genres all the different formats we were dealing with. They had some trouble kind of putting them all together into one format, and we finally figured it all out. But it was tricky there for a minute, and but that was all about trying to make it look the way it would look in reality.
Having seen this in the theater, though, the blowing up of the video to 35 millimeter actually enhances the feeling that you're watching. You forget you're in a movie theater for a minute. It's to the benefit of this film, the blow up process it's been modern day where you just do everything digital and then can just throw it out in a theater. Actually, I don't think this would have visually been as interesting a film to watch in a theater.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. I mean now it's just so easy to do all of that, but not nearly as kind of that grainy, that you've got artificial grain you can put on things obviously now and stuff, but it's not quite the same thing. And there's
it's like putting artificial hiss to make it sound like you're listening to a record. You're not listening to a record.
That's exactly right. So yeah, if I had to do all over it, I would still do it that same way, because we had a lot of fun doing it, for one thing, and our students would help us with these things, and so our students would participate, and they were the crew, and so it was really great in that sense.
You got to do a recent showing of this in 35 millimeter there in Lawrence. 22 years later, how are people reacting today?
Oh, the same as they did back when it first came out, and it's actually just 20 years. I mean, we sold it, but it didn't come out until like 2 years later. I mean, when we sold the film to IFC, then I think they got scared of it, and it wasn't until Owen Gleiberman did an article in Entertainment Weekly, and he kind of said, "Why hasn't this great film been released?" That IFC then released it, and they didn't know how to market it. They didn't know how to sell it. I mean, I never could be on TV talking about it, because the Today Show or something like that could not talk about something like this. And I learned so much about the limitations in American life of race, and how the discomfort that people have, liberal and conservative, about race, and about how hard it is to have an honest conversation about American history because of that discomfort. So it's just, the movie just, it just continues to be this I kind of believe it's the most controversial film ever made in, American history. And I say that because it's, people have been fired because of the movie. They showed the movie at the Dalton School a few years ago, and the New York Times called me and said they showed the school, and there was a big uproar against it, and the principal had to apologize to the school for showing it. But there's no sex, there's no violence, there's no bad language. It's just American history.
But there's satire.
And there's satire, yes.
Satire is much more offensive than sex, violence, or bad language to
That's
America.
exactly right. That's exactly right.
Last week when we were discussing Coonskin, which we all agreed is a racist movie, but we also all agreed that that wasn't what made us feel uncomfortable. It was the satire.
Yeah, when I saw Coonskin in the theater as a kid, and I didn't quite get it as a kid. I mean, it didn't offend me. I just didn't quite get the joke, and I was probably maybe not hip enough at the time to get it.
You weren't smoking the right stuff.
I think that was probably the deal. Yes, and that back in those days, guys would do that. You'd go, you'd make a movie, and it was like for the doper crowd, kind of thing, and whereas CSA is kind of geared for the very, for American citizens, and very sober, paying attention to the world kind of folks, and that's where it's so offensive, because they know what it is, but they don't want to talk about it.
The number of times I went, "Oh my God," watching this movie was, a record number, because there's stuff that was like kind of shocking, but it was important to see it and absorb it and understand what is being said. I also really love the music, what American music would sound like without the influence of Black Americans. And it sounded like Lawrence Welk.
Not very good.
She's got freckles on her butt, she is nice.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
It was so bad, but it was hilarious. And even the weird bluegrassy cover of Bad Boys at the parody of Cops was like, oh my God, that's amazing.
Yeah, we had that was a lot of fun too, and there were so many people that contributed things that when they got the joke. They got kind of, without trying to be funny. They would just did it with the with all that what if in mind, and it's just funny. So you don't have to really try to be funny. It's just what it is, and you put it in the right context, and it's funny. It's absurd.
I don't think you have to have a knowledge of the Lost Cause narrative to laugh your ass off at the reversal of the Lost Cause narrative in the industrial North in this film. I don't think that's even an intellectual joke. That's just funny, no matter how much you know about history.
I liked how political things tracked from the Civil War forward, like the Republican and Democrat parties were switched, because early on, that's what they were before they changed in the early 20th century. I thought that was really interesting. And the fact that women still didn't have the right to vote because, look who won the war. I love the actual historical facts that were carried forward. Like, what really would it be like? And it's like, yeah, that's horrible and terrifying, and I'm glad that's not how it turned out. And
yeah, I think that's the thing. Not to get into that too deep, but that's the thing that the screenings I've had in the last couple of years here have all talked about, how prescient the film is and how much it speaks about now.
How many things did you leave out that you would have put in? Like, I can't imagine. There's so many other things that I feel like you could have put into the film.
Yeah, that's the tough thing, is that there's so many connections to history that and what I call reversing the history. What Erin was talking about earlier about how women don't get to vote, and gay rights don't exist, and you just go down a list of all the things that don't happen. And that was kind of the fun history geek part of me. I had a lot of fun with that, because everything that's happened historically in American life has always been, a struggle. No one said, hey, let's give women rights. Women had to fight for it. and there was, and suffragettes had to go through a lot of crap for that. And there were some people that got it, and there were some people that really fought it. And that's the case in everything. And with obviously with African Americans, and every racial group in the United States, I have that section in the film about what happens to the Japanese during World War II. And so, I always kind of embraced the history based on the footage that I had access to. So I used internment camp photos after World War II for that section of the film. And so the movie's kind of commenting on the what if, but it's also commenting on the what is. So I'm always trying to make a double, give you a kind of double whammy, a double point in terms of what the what if of the CSA is saying and the what is of the USA, because I was actually more interested in the what is of the USA, because again, my intent was always to try to make history and slavery specifically real to people. One of the problems of slavery, American slavery, is that there is no film footage of it. The thing with the Holocaust, that's why the Holocaust films are so important, and that's why Spielberg knows that if the Nazi people in the United States and the world, if they could, they would get rid of all of that footage so they could say it never happened. Well, that's why people still today don't believe slavery was that bad of a deal. They don't believe the horrors of slavery, and they want to believe all the bad Hollywood movies that were made that made slavery not seem so bad. And that's for a lot of different reasons. The big one is that they just didn't care about African Americans, and they didn't care about the pain of slavery and the problems of slavery. And so you always get slavery through the point of view of Scarlett O'Hara in one version or another. And that is a problem. And that continues to be a problem still today. And people still don't really understand. That's why, when people do have these current attacks on things, it's hard to respond because people don't understand the real horrors of slavery, because they don't see it in movies. They don't see it in movies. They never have seen it much in movies. I mean, Roots was a big deal because Roots was the first time that it really kind of showed you kind of what was going on, how it really happened. And that was still pretty tame compared to, the reality of slavery. But it was great because it reached a lot of Americans. And for the first time, Americans took a moment and said, oh, so that's what happened during slavery, and felt it, which is not just an intellectual thing, but they had to feel it too. And so feeling it was the thing that made it have such an impact. We've not had nearly the education or nearly the emotional education that we should have about these things. And my argument is that if you feel those things now, then you tend not to repeat them later. Some of the things that we're seeing now are because people don't really understand when they happened earlier in American life, and they just don't kind of make those connections between kind of some of the horrors you're starting to see now in this country and the horrors that we've already experienced in our history. And the fact that you don't know those details of how things unfolded in our history, especially the emotional details of it, that to me is the thing I always kind of try to come back to. When you don't feel these things, you tend not to retain them. You tend not to kind of understand them in detail enough to kind of make connections to today.
Well, thankfully, for instance, after you and Spike Lee made BlacKkKlansman, Hollywood released the Green Book later that year.
Yes.
So that we could solve racism again.
Yes. Yeah, and that's the thing. It's like audiences are better than that. Even if they're not, they need to be, and we need to make them better than that. I grew up in the 70s with all these great 70s movies, and the movies of the 70s always challenged you in various ways. And audiences, I believe, still want to be challenged. And if they don't want to be challenged, it's because they just don't know they don't want to be challenged, but they really do want to be challenged. When they try to tame things down and kind of give you things that are a nice liberal kind of movie that you don't have to feel too bad about in the end, you don't retain that stuff at all. you don't learn anything, you don't retain anything. Those movies disappear. It's the fact that, Evelyn Mulwray just shot in the eye in Chinatown, and it's so bad at the end that you remember that ending of Chinatown, because it is bad. And it says, damn, the corruption often wins, and the good guys, more than time, often they often lose.
Sila Blume, any questions for Kevin Willmott?
First of all,
we got the battle of the great baritones here.
First of all, I want to make a silly comment about the problem with the movie. When Erin said that you did everything, so many complexities to the film, it is so well done to the point that a person who's not well informed will get confused. And will, just like Erin said about certain things that were reality, but because it's well so blended so well, you kind of forget where reality is, where is satire, where is documentary really, and where is mockumentary. When I consider many of the so-called friends that I have right now, who I've been meeting with regularly every week where I work, they are following a certain political direction that I don't want to go into right now. And I see in them the same problem. Even though they have some weird views about what a Mexican is and what a black person is, they're not bad people. They're not really racist. I don't know where that comes from, and I don't have any way of saying to them, for this factual reason, you shouldn't think this and this and this way. When I do a film like the one you did, I'm asking myself, who would I be speaking to? And perhaps who are you trying to address? On one side, you're showing the film to people on the left, which agree with you. You're showing it to people on the right, which most likely don't agree with you. Are you trying to remind the people on the left that they are right? Or are you trying to prove something to the right to convince them otherwise, which actually, I don't really know if we can do that. In those people that went to the film, to that screening, and you said that they walked out, I was wondering, why did they walk out? What happens in the soul of a person to suddenly see something new, which they should have seen all along? I don't know what happens, why they don't see it, why they suddenly see it. In my opinion, we have no way, I don't care if I'm in Japan, Germany, New York City, Idaho, I have no way of really making clear to any human being, this is wrong and this is right. Or this is wrong and it's too extreme, and you have no reason that you can show me for which to do that. So when we see some of the people in the movie with their conviction and sentimentality and this drama on their face and their smile and their accentuation of certain things, how they are so convinced of what they're doing, even though we know that they're wrong. So how do you convince that person, look, I understand that you're sincere, but how can I suggest that you open your eyes? I mean, these things, this topic and this difficulty with both sides really makes me crazy, because I don't see how we can move forward by accepting that we are all the same.
Yeah, Kevin, why didn't you solve racism?
Yeah.
Paul Haggis solved it.
I'm trying my best here. Well, what it really comes down to is belief systems. The skinheads that saw the film, I would probably say that when you start to challenge someone's belief system, then they pull back. They just pull back. I've seen it. I've been black.
But why? But why do they pull back?
Well, because they
realize they were wrong.
No, because they don't want to change. They don't want the truth. They don't. That's why you have Fox News. Because, I want to hear what I want to hear, and I don't want to have anybody tell me the other side of the story. And so, because I don't want to be challenged, I don't want to feel something that I don't want to feel. I don't want to care about someone I don't want to care about. That's why the other side always wants to sell what they're selling, and what they're selling, they try to sell it with your counter argument in mind, because they don't want the person that's taking it in to question it on any level. And the minute that their belief system gets challenged, and maybe a dialogue might start, maybe you might ask a question, maybe you might come back home, and on the way from seeing CSA, you might have a conversation with your wife or husband or friend and say, I wonder about this. And they don't want you to do that, because the minute you start questioning things, then that's when things start to kind of, maybe you have the opportunity to start opening up a little bit. Maybe you'll go back and you'll rethink something. Maybe you'll go back and see something differently now, that you've always looked at one way, and now you see it maybe a slightly different way.
Well, I have a question for both you and Sila then. How is it that the same people who are standing up against trans rights right now, with this tiny minority in the population, are the same people who are on the wrong side of history about gay marriage, who are the same people who were on the wrong side of history about the Iraq War, who are the same people who were on the wrong side of history about miscegenation and interracial marriage and civil rights, and the idea that people of other races are even human? These exact same people can be so convinced that they're right this time. This time, though, this is the line. I am correct on this. And yeah, we were wrong last time. But no.
See, I think all of those things come from the same place, which is a limiting freedom. I mean, that's why the CSA, for me, becomes the metaphor of American life. So you have two choices as an American. You can believe in the USA, or you can believe in the CSA. And the USA grants freedom. It expands freedom. As we learn things, so I didn't know, I didn't really understand gay people. So now that they're explaining who they are, maybe we should embrace that, and maybe they should have rights, and maybe there's a such thing as trans people. Oh, okay, well maybe we need to make sure they're protected, and that we should expand our protections and their rights, and make sure people understand them, and we should study what's going on with them, and they should talk about who they are freely and openly, and we all learn from that. And everything you laid out, Eric, that is the opposite of expanding freedom. And that is the challenge of American life. The USA wants to expand freedom. The CSA wants to limit freedom. And it wants to limit freedom because of a lot of things, then that's where all the stuff comes in: religion and racism and sexism and homophobia and transism, and all the isms are there that and all of those connect to one thing: fear. And the fear comes in where it is, you might take something I want from me. So it's money, or it's property, or it's position, or it's leverage, or it's ultimately it's power in some kind of way. And so to me, that's the CSA. What I learned from the CSA is that you got one country that wants to expand freedom and one country that wants to limit freedom. And that is the American struggle. That is America as a whole. And everything, and a lot of times the folks that may be interested in this freedom cause don't understand this other freedom cause, and that's a problem too. But ultimately, the CSA sees all of them the same way. They see all of them as an attack on their whiteness and their superiority and their male superiority. That was defined from the very beginning of the nation. The nation really started out as, I think, the CSA, not the USA. It started out as white men, slave owners that created the country. And then there was a debate at the time it was being created that, well, maybe we don't need this slavery thing. Maybe we should get rid of it. And they said, no, we got to hold on to it. I'm not picking that tobacco. I'm not doing that. No, I'm not. My guys, I got people to do that. So that debate has carried on. And then the Civil War said, okay, we're going to be two different countries. We're going to have a CSA and USA. And then the Civil Rights Movement after that said, okay, we're going to try to be the USA now. And then when Obama was elected, it became such a such a threat to that other group, that other CSA, that you've had this huge backlash, which is what we're living in now. And so now becomes the question of what country are you living in now, the USA or the CSA?
I'm very curious about the fragility of the individual and the fragility of the spirit of the society. I understand very clearly that when we go to industry or the government, they have an agenda. But the spirit of a country never has an agenda. The spirit of the individual doesn't really have an agenda. Where is this idea of racism coming from? It could be imposed by propaganda, which kind of doesn't work. If I don't tend to agree with that, because I would just say, that's crazy. There was a very interesting thing that I considered watching Green Book. Vinny cannot be a racist because something has put a pressure on him to bring him to the point that he finds it disgusting to touch the green glasses of the two Negroes that just drank water from it. And if you saw the film, you remember that part where he's really disgusted and he throws them in the garbage. What I thought about it, when I thought about that, I said, how can you go from being disgusted by something that really cannot disgust you to becoming such a good friend, so deep friend until death?
My answer would be bad writing.
Which leads me to believe that racism in its core really does not exist, because the soul of the person is in nature cannot support that. And that's the development between throwing glasses away and becoming his friend. So that's connected somehow with my intention when we watch a movie, especially your movie. How can we make that? I'm not really asking you, but I'm just asking myself, how can we make it more productive so that I think his name was Byrd, the senator, who was KKK and then changed his mind? What happened with that guy? Why did he change his mind? I'm very curious about what made him and others like him change his mind effectively.
Well, what made Byrd change his mind was the civil rights movement. What it was challenging. It was challenging the way he was brought up. He was brought up in West Virginia as a racist member of the Klan. You got to remember, my father.
So he started seeing different things that he had not seen before.
He saw yes, and
okay,
he saw things that, and things progressed in his world also. So things around him started to change, and people around him started to change, and people around him started to say, "I don't think that way anymore." And then the function of the society started to change, and so this door opens up, and so. Whereas Black people never had this job, and suddenly someone hires a Black person, and now he sees a Black person in this room doing this job that he was told as a kid that only white people could do that job, and now he sees a Black person. So that changed. That affects him too. So all these things, he starts seeing Black people show up on TV, and he started to see, and then so it just makes it easier for his belief system to change. It makes it easier for him to start seeing people that he saw one way as a different way. And that is why you make films like this, because there's still people out there right now that are being taught to be racist. And you got to understand, racism is an ideology. So anybody can be racist. I mean, Black people can be racist. Black people can be white supremacists, and they're all
Black people are very racist. Yes, correct.
Yes,
Everybody is.
Everybody is. Yes, yeah. But Black people can be white supremacists. They can believe that white people are superior.
Yes.
And so it's a belief system. It's something they've chosen to believe in. And just as homophobia is a belief system, and everything is a belief system. And so you have to challenge those things as an ideology, so that you can get to that spirit and that human side of them that you're talking about. But that doesn't happen unless the society changes and opens up and allows that person access to that new information.
I like how you use comedy to get the point across too, because people are more willing to listen if you're making them laugh. You know, they've they're, haha, this is funny, this is funny. Oh, wait a minute. And they have to actually think about what they're laughing about. It's a really great method of getting people to change their minds, I think.
Oh, no doubt about it. I mean, that's the thing about, the connection to today. People write me all the time and say, I just saw the film, and they see all these connections to today, which is obviously the connection to today is, I would say we're definitely living in the CSA. Before, Trump and that madness started, we kind of went back and forth between the USA and the CSA. But then when Obama was elected, the thing that was so celebrated in the country by progressives and positive people in the world was that we kind of thought we kind of had arrived at the USA. In America, people talk about a post-racial society. But while we were doing all of that, the CSA was planning, and the CSA is always planning their attack. When Abraham Lincoln won the election the first time, and he didn't say one time that he was going to free the slaves, but slavery was so embedded in Southern life, just the fact that he said a couple positive things about Black people, they thought he was going to free the slaves. And so the minute he got elected, they started leaving the United States and making the CSA. The minute he got elected, and he's constantly saying, I'm not going to free the slaves. I just want the Union to stay together. I want the Union to stay together. I want the Union to stay together. And they did not believe him because that's how much they believed in racism. That's how much racism defined and slavery defined their life, and white supremacy defined their life. And that same thing is still with us today. People, I've had so many racist people tell me, well, I have a Black friend. I got my Black friend here. I can't be racist. I have a Black friend. It's like, Donald Trump I'm sure he thinks he has Black friends.
Yes. Yes.
But he's the king of racism. And that is the trouble with America, because we've not defined it in a way that people can kind of understand it. They don't want to believe racism exists. It's just embedded, it embodies everything that is American. And what we've been trying to do since the founding of the country is to get rid of it, is to exercise it from our being. And we kind of had it in a little box. And he opened that box up and let it all back out again. He's made it easy and public and acceptable to be racist again in this country,
and profitable. That's the most important part.
That's exactly, and profitable. And
before 2016, there was a financial cost.
That's right.
You had to pay to hold those beliefs.
That's right.
People would, lose their university position, or or their baseball team, or their television programs for it. Just like Robert Byrd changed his views because he saw he could stay in office by galvanizing his Black constituency, the right now has seen that they can stay in office by galvanizing their racist community.
That's right.
But my answer when someone says that they can't be racist because they have a Black friend is, I have a racist friend. That doesn't mean I sympathize with their views.
But you understand they're racist, though, and that's the difference. In the big difference between folks that say I got a Black friend, I can't be racist, is that they don't understand that they're racist. Slave owners love their slaves. They loved them. And every time they had to sell them downriver, which ultimately meant sending them to their death, or every time they broke up their family, they said, I really feel bad that I had to take so-and-so's mom and sell her for, the price of a Lexus car today. I feel really bad about that, but I had to do it. But I truly do love them, and they're my friend.
Well, that's the great scene in Spike Lee's Do the Right Thing when I can't remember his name, but the Italian character is listing off the Black celebrities and says, well, they don't count, they're not Black. Well, they're Black, but they're not. If that didn't make you feel uncomfortable as a white person sitting in the seats in 1989, then you weren't thinking about things. you were speaking about Hollywood, but if you're not Eddie Murphy
That's right.
and you can't get Denzel Washington in your film, then go fuck yourself.
When you succeed in American life, whether you're black or gay or a woman or anything, you become a celebrity. And when you become a celebrity, you now transcend race and all of that stuff. You are now something else besides who you really truly are.
Until you make a mistake.
Until you make a mistake, and then suddenly become what you are again. And that's how it works in American life. And
that brings up a very important point about African and African American filmmakers. All of them seem to be held to a different standard than their white counterparts. We were talking about this with Ousmane Sanben, who never really stretched any limits because he was the groundbreaker. He brought African cinema to the world, but he couldn't do anything that could make the white audience feel at all uncomfortable because he was carrying the weight of all the future African filmmakers on his back, and people just won't accept anything that is experimental or stretches any limits from a person of color, the way that they did from, say, the French New Wave and Godard and Truffaut, who were making films around the same time.
That's right. I mean, the thing that they are the Jackie Robinson of African filmmakers. He has to do it in a certain way so that people go, now he's a fine filmmaker. And that means you've got to succeed. You've got to be great. It's like Obama. Obama he had to not have any scandal, and he had to, his family has to be perfect, and he's got to do everything. It's like Sidney Poitier, breaking the actor mold. You have to do all these things perfect so that no one can, because all these people want to attack you, and any avenue you give them, they will attack you on it. So you can't give them any avenue to attack. And so that also means that you're limited in terms of how much you can throw your elbows around. That's one of the problems of being a first, is that you have to typically be a more restrained and more conservative. So when I was in kindergarten, 6 years old, my first day of kindergarten, a little girl called me nigger. Now, I went back home. I didn't know what nigger even was. I went home, asked my mother. I said, this little girl called me nigger. What is that? She said, my mother said, you go back and call her redneck peckerwood. So that little girl at 6 years old had already been told what a nigger was, and that I was one, and she needed to call me that. So the answer to that is that people are taught these things. They're taught, they grow up in an environment of where race, the word nigger is thrown around. Can you imagine how much Trump calls people niggas and uses the word nigger all the time in the world that he lives in? Can you imagine that? I mean, we'll hear about it after he's dead, and people will finally be honest and tell us these things. You can only imagine the awful, horrible, horrible things that are being said in that White House right now. And those things are being said, and those things are being accepted by people who would say they're not racist, but they're not saying one thing about them. They're not coming out and saying, oh, he said something horrible yesterday, or he said this, or so-and-so said that. No one's saying anything. That all will come out after he's dead. And so the reality of it is that these people were taught these things. And the thing is, they come out and they normalize it, and they put it out there, and other people stay quiet, and they don't respond to it, and they don't reject it, and they accept it, and that's how it goes. And that's why you make films, so that film becomes a weapon to fight these people back. And whether they say it or not, that's what they believe. And there's a whole bunch of people, half the country in the United States thinks that Donald Trump is okay. That means half the country is racist. Because you cannot see him do all these things and say all the things he's done and do all the things he's done and not know he's a racist. Everybody knows he's a racist, but what it means that those people that still support him don't care about racism. It means they don't care about it. And we have to admit that. We can't debate it. That's a fact. That's just a fact. And so, when you see people like that, and you see, people that will, don't want to accept the fact that people are always trying to find a leg up on other people. That's almost like the American way. So whether it's race or gender or sex or sexual preference or whatever you want to call it, they're trying to find a way to be better than the other guy. Okay, that's kind of the competitive American way. And so whatever they can use to make more money than you, to get the better job than you, to get the better house than you, to get whatever, they're going to do it. And that's why it still exists.
Well, the person who makes $9.50 an hour doesn't want the minimum wage to go up above $9.50 an hour, even though they would get a raise, because they don't want the people who make less than them to make the same or more than them.
Exactly. That's why the people who don't have health care don't want other people to have health care. That's why they support Republicans, because they say, I don't care your grandma doesn't get to go to the doctor. I don't care that your mom, might have breast cancer, but she didn't have the money to go to the doctor. I don't care about that. I don't care that you get cancer and you lose your house and everything else that you own because you get this astronomical medical bill because you've gotten sick. I don't care about that. I don't want, the people that have health care, they don't say, why do these people have to go through this? Because they're not trying to care about their neighbor. The Republicans have been really great at selling, things like healthcare and race and immigration, and all of these things are a threat to you. And they've made people vote against their own interests, vote against their own health, vote against. Now they even got people believing that they shouldn't take vaccines so they can live without diseases. I mean, it's just insane.
Yeah, that is fucked up.
Well, there was that book that you based the title of that documentary on, What's the Matter with Kansas, is all about. Why is the state of Kansas time and time again vote against their own self-interest?
That's right. That's right. And it's because these people can sell fear and hate, and people buy it. It's hate is a really easy thing to sell, and Americans buy it wholesale, and it's just so easy to sell, and it is hard to kind of, once someone has breathed that smog in, it's hard to get it out of their lungs. The place where you get it out of your lungs often is education. And that's why education is also being attacked, because that's
the metaphor that I always used was like rock candy, because it's that sugar buzz that you get.
Yeah.
From hate. But it wears off real quick, so you have to get more hate. And have you ever noticed that things never move to the center? They always move more radical. So if you say to someone who has a radical right-wing agenda, okay, I will concede this to you. That never becomes the center line, because they'll say, okay, well, yeah, but that's not good enough. And you have to concede something else. And you have to concede something else.
That's
and
right.
It never moves back to the center.
No, that's right. That's right. Because ultimately they'll concede some kind of crazy extreme thing, but that's what they're ultimately trying to hold on to, because they know that if you give that up, then the line starts to move a little bit, and that's what they don't want to do.
I was discussing free school lunches with my mom because I think they should be free. I mean, it would help a lot of people if school lunches were free. We're already paying the taxes to fund the schools. Why not give the kids lunch while they're there? And her argument was that she didn't want kids who didn't need it to get it because they didn't deserve it. Okay, so you're going to have like one kid whose parents have no problem buying their lunches, and because of that one kid, you're going to deny the other 9 kids free lunch?
Right.
That's the mindset, is I don't want somebody else to have something I don't have, and it's insane. I want people to have things,
Or are you going to just discriminate against the entire trans community because 6 of them are athletes who compete against women?
Yes,
I have
that's right.
so many thoughts about that. I could go on for hours about that whole situation.
I don't believe you. Really, Erin? on transphobia? You never.
Yeah, I know. It's never come up on this podcast.
In Kansas, we had they just voted a bathroom bill, and it's horrible stuff. But then before that, they had they tried to pass a crazy law and about the sports thing. And this film I have called No Place Like Home, which is how I know about Gilbert Baker, that they had to pass the whole law about, trans sports. And there's only one athlete in the state that was trans, that was playing sports, and she was on the bowling team. That tells you how insane. But that's the kind of mentality, that's the kind of fear that can be sold to these people.
Yeah.
That's why they vote against having health care.
They're using our bathrooms and taking our jobs.
Yes.
It's
Yes.
bullshit. It's such insane bullshit. It makes me so angry.
It all comes from that ultimately, I don't want freedom to expand. I don't want you to understand this group of people over here.
One of the more research sections of CSA about them expanding into Latin America and expanding slavery and expanding repression and expanding white supremacy. That, of course, was based on people like Walker.
Yes.
Yes. And his experiments there in Honduras, where he set up basically a slave state dictatorship with American backing. That is not that far off of what would have happened had the Confederacy won. Well,
yeah,
we'll get to whether I think the Confederacy did actually win the Civil War, but.
Yeah, that's right. And that was their actual plan. I mean, one of the things that Breckinridge was the guy that was running against Lincoln. One of the things that they talked about was that if they had taken over Mexico, that they would have had 25 other slave states that could have voted for Breckinridge, and he would have beat Lincoln. That was their goal and their plan. There was a group called the Knights of the Golden Circle, who were this secret society who were made up of people that became the Confederacy. John Wilkes Booth was a member. Jesse James was a member. There were a lot of people that were members of it that were part of the cabinet of Buchanan's cabinet that was the president before Lincoln. And they were all trying to expand slavery into Mexico, Central America, the top part of South America, the Caribbean. That was their plan. That was the plan that they had. And if the Confederacy won, they obviously would have carried that out.
Well, now, Kevin, speaking as someone who grew up in Michigan, now lives in southern Georgia, like right on the Florida border, Valdosta to be exact, I have to tell you, I think when people ask me what if the Confederacy had won the Civil War, I think they lost the battle, which was the war itself, but they won the war. Because all I see around me is the Confederate States of America, the lost cause narrative. I think that once the Civil War stopped being taught about as being about slavery and about freedom, and they could supplement tariff of abominations, which now tariffs are a good thing. I know, blah, 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 blah. I'm not asking it to make sense. But once they could say to themselves that people who raised arms against their own country were acting in a right way, that there was no going back, because how do you then backtrack after that? And I see it everywhere that we go. I see it on television. I see it in the president's speeches. And to your point, I saw it during the Obama administration just as much. Why was it that Obama couldn't have a single scandal? Why couldn't his IRS even investigate fraudulent PACs?
Why couldn't he even wear a tan suit?
Yes, exactly. And to me, it's because the South, won. Let's go around the panel, and that'll be our final thoughts for this episode. Are we currently living in the Confederate States of America?
I would say unequivocally yes. I mean, look at what these people are doing. So I grew up conservative, which sucks. I learned better once I got away from bad influences in my life, and I'm pretty much a socialist now. I've seen how conservative ideals have affected my family, have been in my family, have been passed down through my family. I watched how my dad slowly lost his mind watching Fox News. I think the best example of him being completely insane is when I was growing up, he was worried about hantavirus because he has a company that works on generators, and sometimes there are mouse nests in there, and he was concerned that his technicians would encounter mouse droppings and get hantavirus. So he had procedures for how to not do that. And then COVID came along, and he didn't believe in the vaccine. He didn't believe it was a real virus. Only 3% of people who catch it will die. That's a lot of people, you know? It's all from Fox News. It's all from watching this propaganda that is, making him stupid when I know he's not stupid. He's just following what his parents taught him and what their parents taught them for generations. And the fact that my brother and I don't believe any of that anymore is kind of a coup because all of my cousins still think that way. It's so inherent in white society. We're all, we all have at least one cousin that believes something stupid that we know is wrong, but you don't want to make trouble at Thanksgiving. And that's why nothing ever changes. We don't want to make trouble. Well, we have to make trouble. We have to stand up and make a lot of noise and tell them that they're wrong and what they're doing is terrible and teach our kids better. On the plus side, my son reads books on anti-racism, so at least maybe I've had a good influence there. But I mean, I'm just one person. Anyway, yeah, we're living in the worst timeline right now, especially the backlash to Obama just existing has really brought it to the surface.
Jennifer?
Yes, it's a nightmare that we're living in currently, for sure. And
see, now that's not my point. My point is that it's always been a nightmare. My point is not that this is that we're living in extraordinary times. My point is quite the opposite, that it's always been on fire and it's always been shit.
Okay, I hear that point. I mean, it is true, like, even with the racism. I mean, I agree when Sila said that everyone is racist, right? There is a level of that across the board, but there's a whole new wave of people. I mean, there's been plenty of people that don't see, never want to see. It's gone down through generations. But then there's other people that just, again, like that we cured racism in the United States. Like, we're over this. Like, this is behind us. And I agree with that. It's always been, I mean, I don't think racism went away. It's here. It's been here. It's been very veiled. And now people are emboldened to be even, I just feel like it's been elevated to a new level of comfort level of not, I mean, on the one hand, it's refreshing in that they're not hiding it anymore, right? Like, they're just right out there and it can be seen. But then there's all these other people that just don't see what they don't want to see. Like, they just have their blinders on, or they're in their little vacuum and they're just like, what are you talking about? It's perfectly fine. And I'm like, how is it perfectly fine? It's not perfectly fine.
It's time we came clean. No one on this panel actually thinks Paul Haggis solved racism or that Crash is even a very good movie. That was satire. But Brokeback Mountain cured homophobia.
Oh, entirely and completely.
Oh my goodness!
For the very few people who that listened to the Coonskin episode, we were kidding. Sila Blume, your thoughts there from New York City on are we living in the Confederate States of America?
I would not use the comparison at all. Obviously not because I think we are fine, but because I think it's worse now. Let's say a few decades ago, several decades ago, we had not been to the moon, which taught us some things, at least in terms of possibilities. A couple of decades ago, we did not have access to the most historical, profound information within seconds as we do today. That means, as opposed to before 2000, now pretty much anyone in India, in Ecuador, in New York, in Idaho can take their iPhone or whatever they call that and ask, when did Elvis Presley die? And find out right away. We know so much today, and we have heard about Hitler so many times. So many times. We have heard through Roberto Benigni about Hitler. We have heard through so many different ways about so many things. We know so much more. We have so much more information today than the last 100 years, that when we look at what we are doing today in terms of attacking other leaders, attacking other countries, attacking our own family, whatever we are doing today, when we compare it to when we were doing it 200 years ago, because we knew less or we had less information or whatever, I think you all know what I'm talking about. For that reason, I find that we are much, much worse today because we should know better.
And last but not least, Kevin.
You know, as much as the internet and everything gives us access to all this wonderful information, Americans are not very smart. They're not very smart. And I think that's something that you can't deny. I mean, here you had someone that just tried to overthrow the country on January 6th, and we reelected him. I mean, how dumb do you have to be to do that? I mean, it's just kind of astounding.
Pretty goddamn dumb.
Pretty goddamn dumb. And so that, to me, it says that we have access to all this amazing information, and obviously we're not accessing any of it. And we're not asking the right questions, and we're not asking questions at all, and we don't know our history. And so
we don't care.
And we don't care.
We simply don't care because we
don't
continue.
Well, here's my metaphor for why so much information being available on the internet has actually made us more stupid. It's the same as when I tried to quit smoking and I used the patches and I was able to quit smoking. But because I could always just go get the patches whenever I was attempted to start smoking again, well, in the back of my head, I'm like, because I never put myself through withdrawal, I could just get more patches. So I just get myself addicted to smoking again. When the information is this easy to access, when you don't have academic rigor to gain the information, when there is nothing to your being able to look up a date or what have you, you don't have to, for instance, when it comes to cinema, and I went through the Michigan State University Ken Haro's African cinema class. If I could just have AI write up a history of African cinema and not have to go through 6 months of Ken Haro's class and watching those films and come out with the same information, it's not going to be the same because the cost to learn it was not the same. And so I am not sacrificing enough to make the actual having of that information worthwhile.
Yes, I agree.
I have said that I feel like we're, I guess in my lifetime, more polarized than we've been, and more like closer to civil war in modern times, right? Like yes, it's always been here and it's really bad, but it's just, I feel like it's escalating at a rate. And part of the other thing I worry about with everything that we're saying is that getting to the point of othering and dehumanizing each other so much is really, I don't know, I feel like we need to take pause within ourselves and remember we are all humans, and keeping that in mind and keeping some level of, because to go down this path with people that, I mean, you said it earlier, you hinted at it, but are Holocaust deniers, are slavery deniers, are saying we never went to the moon, Sila, like,
right.
It's hard to not other.
That's right. And they've made it so easy to other. They've made it so easy, you know. I mean, you know, Fox News others people all day long, all day and all night.
Yeah.
And there's three or four other channels that do it now, and there's not one channel that CNN is encountering that. MS Now, great channel in a lot of ways, but they can't fully counter it. There's no. The other channels are pure propaganda. They're just pure propaganda. And they have no apologies about just being pure propaganda. And my argument is that if there had been Fox News in 1963, when Dr. King is launching the civil rights movement, when they put those fire hoses on those kids, and all of America said, "Oh my God, that's so horrible. This is maybe my attitude has changed about civil rights, and maybe this Dr. King guy and what they're doing is maybe it is a good thing." If there had been Fox News then, and they had existed, and they would have said, they would have had the counter story when CBS and NBC and ABC were saying, "Oh, look how horrible this is," and Fox News would have been there, and they could have said, oh, those black kids getting hit with those fire hoses, they were assaulting white women the whole damn time. And that's why they put those fire hoses on. And now we have Bull Connor. Tell us how you feel about it, Bull Connor. And Bull Connor would have said, oh, those niggas was doing all kind of horrible shit. And suddenly, you lose the civil rights movement. And you don't have the civil rights movement.
Well, and yeah, that's an excellent point, because George Wallace was never on Face the Nation.
No. And when they did have him on, they attacked him. They didn't have him on like
even William F. Buckley wouldn't have those type of people on his show. You know,
right.
So maybe it is worse. I don't know. Here's where and maybe this is a gut feeling. I just think that maybe it's more out in the open now, but it was always there.
And it sells. That's why it's a big reason why it's so tortured.
Good point.
Well, we've never had it where, you know, the real news media never did that because they were too smart to do that. The smarter you are, the more freedom you believe in. The dumber you are, the more you hate freedom. And so when they saw black people trying to be free, they were sympathetic to it because they were smarter people. Now, not all of them were for it, but most of them were. Most of them were sympathetic, and most of them saw what was happening with those fire hoses. They saw that they saw that as wrong, and they don't see murdering Renee Good in Minnesota as wrong on Fox. If they do feel like it's wrong, they're not going to say it out loud because they know the people that own Fox believe that they want to kill Renee Good. So that's the reality of it. So, you know, so that never existed in America until now. And they have 5 or 6 other channels now that are saying the same thing. And the Democrats have no channel, not one.
Because it doesn't sell, because it's not profitable.
That's what they believe. I believe that you can do any damn thing in America if you know how to do it.
I mentioned Buckley. I think that's another problem I see today, that the conversation, the intellectual and otherwise just plain, deep, serious conversation probably does not really exist anymore. No. When I think of the debate between Buckley and James, come on, remember
Baldwin.
James Baldwin.
At least from my mind, the way I remember it, I've heard it a couple of times, I heard intelligence from both sides. I might disagree with one side, but it was still a conversation where both listened to each other. That does not happen today.
No.
And I think the more we communicate, and I'm not talking about conversation, I'm talking about communication by texting and by spelling you instead of Y-O-U, etc., there is no conversation taking place, and that's why Fox is so successful. Because
now, I don't want to extend this episode too much, but I disagree with you 100%, because if you watch that debate, William F. Buckley literally says he doesn't think black people should be allowed to vote to James Baldwin's face because they are too stupid. It's always been this way. The John Birch Society before William F. Buckley, before the John Birch, it's always been this way. It's just before there was a financial cost to it, and now it's actually profitable.
I cannot object to that, obviously. I'm referring to the possibility of having the conversation openly, and I don't think that's possible today.
No, I think that's right. I mean, and the problem is, one of the reasons you don't see it also is because there's no money in that, because we're not very smart. And so most people are not interested in that conversation. And that's
a fact too, yes.
I mean, you know, because with media, it's all about the money. So you got to have, you know, asses in the seats watching it to get on TV. So, I mean, the smarter something is, the harder it is for you to find it.
And that's why I like comedy as a way to change people's minds. It puts the asses in the seats. People like to laugh. People want to be entertained.
That's right.
That's why I like satire and comedy.
But as Karl Marx once said of Hegel's proposition that history repeats itself, Marx said that's true, but first is tragedy and then is farce. Guess which one I think we're living through now.
Yeah, exactly. Yes.
If you had the chance, Kevin, to
Yes.
make this movie again, based on what you know today, in terms of what this person in the White House is, in terms of the reactions to your film has been, if you had a chance to produce the movie again from step one, would you do it with less but more brutal stuff? Or would you make it much, much simpler to digest so more people understand exactly, not that it is a mockumentary, not that it's satire, but really straightforward so that it really, really hurts?
A few years ago, I wrote a script about Joe McCarthy, Senator Joe McCarthy becoming president. It was going to be in the same CSA approach, mockumentary kind of thing, faux documentary. And the difficulty I had with, I wrote the script, but the difficulty I had with it, all the things that they weren't going to be commercials in it, but there were things that were humorous in the film, showing the absurdity of Joe McCarthy becoming president. All the things that I was showing like that were kind of the entertaining part of the film, the Republican Party kept doing in real life to more extreme than I could satire it. If, for instance, I had a scene in there where there was a politician that was shooting a machine gun, and they had immigrants running from the machine gun, running over a wall, and they were talking about, vote for me because I'm, I know I'll get tough on these foreigners. Every commercial you see now for Republicans, they're shooting a machine gun in real life. Everyone. And so I could not kind of out satire. I could not out absurd the absurdity of our lives. So there's the problem you have is that it's got to hit the wall, and we're either going to lose America or whatever is going to happen. It's got to hit the wall, and this thing's got to die. What I mean is the crazy extreme thing that's happening now is going to have to stop, or there is going to be no response pretty soon, because you can't tell a joke in Nazi Germany. I mean, it just don't, no matter what movie you make and what joke you tell and what satire you create, if half the country is hate, then you're just not living in any kind of civilized society anymore. And that's we're quickly approaching that. I think we're quickly approaching. And no one's going to say it out loud, but that's going to be the reality of it. And so so that's really the question you pose. That's ultimately the problem of that question is, while we still kind of have this semi-civilized kind of open-minded world that could intake something like that, you could maybe make a movie like that still, but that window is rapidly closing.
MESA, make extremism satire again.
Yes, it's hard to out mega.
The Gulf of America, for instance.
Yes.
If you had written that into one of your scripts, everyone would have said, "Okay, that's not funny," because that's just But
well, one of the things people love about CSA is the wall, the cotton curtain. Right. There's the whole thing of the wall, and now we always talk about
the war with Canada.
By the way, did Bill Clinton write to you asking for some money for the fact that you used?
No, he I never heard anything back from those guys, but But I voted for Bill. I like Bill. Bill's all right. He's not a bad guy. He just lied when he shouldn't have lied. And
probably spent a little bit too much time on Epstein's Island.
Probably. Well, yeah. Not defending him on any way, but yeah. I mean, he. And that's Bill Clinton's problem.
Well, and if you look at his Clinton Foundation, he spent way too much time on billionaires' islands, period.
Yes, that's right.
And so I think that is emblematic of a much deeper problem in our society.
Yes, that's right. That's right.
Let's do our social media roundup. We'll start with Sila Blume. Where can people find you on the internet?
You could follow me on silablume.life, where I display most of the work I do.
Jennifer Trujillo, where can people find you and the Gilbert Baker Film Festival online?
GilbertBakerFilmFestival.lgbt, and on Instagram, Gilbert Baker Film Fest. And on Instagram, you'll find a link tree that will connect you to all things Gilbert Baker, and you can also connect with me there. And don't forget to connect with us in the comments. Talk to us. Give us your opinions about the show and things that we do here. Thanks.
Erin Brown, where can people find you and our podcast on the interwebs?
You can find me on Blue Sky at Toad Puppy, and you can find me on YouTube at Pizza Horse Productions. And the podcast is at ko-fi.com/World Cinema History. We've got all of our back catalog there. We've got a place where you can comment. Please comment. Please join us in the discussion, because it's a lot of fun. And you can leave us a tip, because that would help us out too. That would help us upgrade our audio equipment and help us not have to get ads on this site. We want to stay ad-free. So yeah, come to ko-fi.com/World Cinema History and check us out.
Although I might do some of those ads from CSA throughout
I would
this
support that
episode.
I would support that. Those are amazing.
It's fair use, Kevin. We're describing the movie. It's fair use. I don't want to see a copyright claim from you.
Right. Get my lawyer on you, dude.
Kevin, where can we find you on the internet?
Well, I'm not much.
Well, where can people get updated on your work?
You can. Well, I don't even know about that, but I'm occasionally on Facebook, so you can find me on there.
All right, everybody. Thanks for being here, Kevin. That was a great conversation. Listeners, please join us next week when we continue our exploration of the Southern identity and the visual language of history with Emmy winner Jethro Waters. He'll be discussing his work, including Gunfighter Paradise, and his unique connection to the American South. Thank you, everybody. I'm Eric Trommater, and thank you for listening to World Cinema History.